Although 60,000 veterans have come forward for medical tests across the nation, the delegation is still reluctant to presume there's been a cover-up. Originally, Congress asked the TV networks to develop a rating system to go along with the V-chip, which could block programs parents disapprove of. AAA expects more people to take planes, trains, and buses to get where they want to go these holidays, but that still doesn't compare to the 30 million Americans who will be driving. You can take your pick, regular, low-fat, or even kosher.
Pretty clear, and that is the Pentagon didn't do nearly enough right from the start.
Congressman Pomeroy and the rest of the North Dakota delegation are saying no one should be doubting the reality of the Gulf War syndromes. Vets complain of joint pain, fatigue, and memory loss.
A lot of us that are just not going to let up on this until we get some answers that make some sense.
The president recently extended the eligibility period for compensation for Persian Gulf War veterans with undiagnosed illnesses, but Peterson says it's just a start.
Somebody served in the Persian Gulf, there ought not to be any time constraint, whether it's 2 years or 10 years or whatever it is.
Right now, the Department of Veterans Affairs offers free exams for vets, whether or not they're ill. But the Pentagon continues to deny that exposure to chemical weapons was the cause of mysterious illnesses. Although 60,000 veterans have come forward for medical tests across the nation, the delegation is still reluctant to presume there's been a cover-up.
The Defense Department has not been as aggressive as it should have been in taking these complaints and these health problems seriously.
What I think it was is a matter of incompetence. They simply didn't put this as a high enough priority, requiring some very serious focus and attention.
Senator Dorgan says Congress is on top of it.
Virtually everyone in Congress is now taking seriously this problem that has affected a good many veterans who served in the Gulf.
Kai Groennings, WDAY, News Center 6, Washington. There will be record numbers of people traveling.
38 million in all. That's up 3% over last year, and it's up 36% over 5 years ago.
AAA expects more people to take planes, trains, and buses to get where they want to go these holidays, but that still doesn't compare to the 30 million Americans who will be driving.
I'm going to be driving to my mother's house up in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
If I go anywhere, it'll be to North Carolina, and I'll be driving.
4 out of 5 travelers will be driving, and that overshadows a struggling airline industry.
Well, our numbers have been pretty flat for the last 2 months, and particularly going into late November and early December, we have not seen an increase that we had hoped we would have at this time of year.
At the same time, it's getting tougher and tougher to book airline tickets during the peak holiday rush near the end of December.
I'm bringing my children from Atlanta and my grandchildren out to to Los Angeles for the holidays.
And they're coming out?
They're going out by air on 3 different airlines, in fact. It's getting kind of tough to book a ticket.
So instead of flying or even driving to their favorite destinations, most Americans have chosen to stay at home.
For the holiday, I'm going to stay at home.
Stay at home? Yeah, staying at home with the folks, with families.
I'll be staying probably home for Christmas this year.
Kai Groennings, First Business. The projects at the Westinghouse Science Fair ranged from a novel regulation of platelet activation to giant magnetoresistance in the reduced Brick-Snyder equation to Anna Maria's aluminum passivating solution for high-pressure water jet systems.
It makes it safer for you to be cutting materials with aluminum in it because you don't have the hazard of the particles reacting in the water.
And who would use this principally?
Well, Ingersoll Rand, which is a water jet company, the ones that lent me the equipment for testing are using it. And the defense company, Alliant Tech Systems in the Twin Cities.
Dr. Thomas Bennett, president of the science service that administers the talent search, says although Anna and her colleagues may sound like a bunch of nerds, they're really well-rounded kids.
Many of them are poets. Most of them are very much involved in their literary magazines. Many of them participate in sports. Many of them are very much involved in orchestras, bands, play several instruments.
The entries were from fields ranging from engineering to physics to biology, like Rose Piapilli's findings about factors in heart disease that block the flow of blood.
So I studied how these spontaneous aggregates formed, and I was able to find in my project that there was a plasma factor that I named plasma inhibitory factor, a universal factor found naturally within the plasma that prevented the platelets from aggregating.
During the final round of judging, the young scientists were interviewed by a panel of 10 distinguished scientists to determine each student's aspirations, creativity, and versatility. Out of a pool of 40 finalists from among 1,600 contestants, New York student Adam Cohen's new nanoscale patterning technique won the day.
The winner of the 56th Westinghouse Science Talent Search from New York City, Adam Cohen.
Well, I came in here to have a lot of fun, and I'm glad I did. Hey, Bonnie, can I take a photo of all the camera people?
He'll take home $40,000, but Anna Marie and the other 39 finalists leave with some cash and memories to last a lifetime. Kai Groennings, WDAY, News Center 6, Washington.
It's good to hear from them.
And it tastes good, too, say many college students. It's all freshly baked. From cookies to muffins to cinnamon rolls, brothers Seth and Joshua Fry have commandeered the college care package market.
Granny's Goodies actually got started up at the University of Wisconsin, and we are pretty much catering to the parents of the students at the University of Wisconsin. And then we decided to bring our business to a national level, providing a 1-800 service, and at that point, catering to the needs of parents of college students all over the country.
They call it Granny's Goodies, but Granny herself only plays an advisory role.
They'll say sometimes, what do you think? You think kids ought to get that?
The baking isn't even handled by anyone in the family. The goodies are actually baked by Amorous Andy's Bakery. The Fry brothers just set up contracts with on-campus student organizations, and the response is tremendous. Their earnings have quadrupled over last year.
It's not a fad. It's not a market that's going to dry up. People will always be going to college. There will always be college students, and there will always be a parent that's going to say, you know, I miss Johnny or I miss Sarah, and I really would love to send them a Granny's Goodies care package.
Delivered directly or sent UPS, the Fry's company has even expanded to retirement homes, summer camps, and offices. But Joshua likes to see their faces.
It's cinnamon rolls.
Wow, that looks pretty good.
It's from Mom and Dad. Very nice.
Some nice parents there.
Yeah, exactly.
Each package comes with the Fry's guarantee to deliver that delicious taste of home. You can take your pick, regular, low-fat, or even kosher.
It's fun. You know, that's the bottom line, is that it's really fun to spread cheer.
Kai Groennings, First Business.
In the last several days, it's traveled, as you know, widely. I have been on the phone a lot. I believe there is more agreement than at first it appears about the necessity to push this thing through to the end. And I will continue to talk with President Yeltsin, President Chirac, and others, but consider the alternative. After all, this man is the only repeat offender around with chemical weapons. He used them on his own people. He used them on the Iranians. And I believe it's a very serious thing, and I think that the American people will understand that.
World War, as President Yeltsin said.
I don't understand what chain of circumstances would lead to that development. I don't believe that will happen.
Peter. Peter, all the time. On Iraq, you said there's need to educate Prime Minister. It isn't entirely clear what the objective of military action would be. Is it intended as a punishment for Saddam Hussein? Is it intended as a substitute for the work of the weapons inspectors destroyed? Or would it continue until Saddam said, right, I'll let him in? And also, you've announced the deployment of some aircraft. Is there any intention to deploy ground troops at all, British ground troops?
No, the deployment that we have made is the deployment that I have described of the aircraft. And in respect of the objectives, well, the objective is very clear. That is to ensure either that the weapon inspectors can come in and finish their task, or that the capability that Saddam Hussein undoubtedly has and wants to develop for weapons of mass destruction is taken out. And it is absolutely essential that what we do is focus upon the best way possible that we can do that. Now, obviously, as the President was saying a moment or two ago, it is not sensible or serious to start discussing the details of the military options available to us. But the purpose of this, the whole way through, the reason we are in this situation is because he has been developing weapons of mass destruction. The only barrier to that has been the inspectors. If the inspectors are prevented from doing their work, then we have to make sure, by the military means of which we are capable, that insofar as possible, that capacity ceases. And that's the objective. And it's an objective that I think is fully in line, as I say, with the original agreements under which Saddam Hussein undertook. I mean, remember, he undertook to destroy any weapons of mass destruction capability, whether nuclear, chemical, or biological. Now, he's in breach of that. We've got to make sure that he complies one way or another with it.
Mr. President, just to go back to the controversy that's been surrounding you lately, there have been various reports that in some ways have come to be accepted as fact. And I just want to give you an opportunity. One of them is that in sworn testimony to the lawyers for Paula Jones, that you changed your version of your relationship with Jennifer Flowers. And I just wonder if you can tell us, I mean, do you now...
Let me just say this. Again, even though the judge's order has been routinely violated by the other side in the case, the judge has issued strict orders in the case that covers everybody, including me, not to discuss it. I can tell you this, and I'm confident as this thing plays out, it will become more apparent in the future. If you go back, I told the truth in my deposition with regard to that issue, and I also did in 1992 when I did the interview, which I think was rerun the other night, the interview that Hillary and I did on 60 Minutes. And you just have to know that, and that I think it will become apparent as this case plays itself out that I did in fact do that. But I am not going to discuss that. The judge has given us strict orders not to discuss anything related to that case. The other side has violated it on a regular basis. I don't intend to do that. I'm just not going to do it.
John.
Prime Minister, Mr. President, is it possible for you to launch an attack if you don't have on board the French, the Russians, the Chinese?
I think, John, you have to distinguish very carefully between what, of course, I accept varying degrees of enthusiasm or commitment for the military option, with the complete unanimity there is in the world community that Saddam Hussein has to comply with the resolutions and that his capacity to develop weapons of mass destruction must be halted. Now, it is difficult for us to see, and for me to see, quite frankly, that if you take that as the position, how diplomacy, unless it is backed up at least by the threat of force, is ever going to work and succeed. But it would be wrong, I think, to think that either for example, our French or our Russian colleagues were not absolutely insistent that Saddam Hussein comply with these resolutions, and they are making diplomatic efforts in order to ensure that that happens. I wish those efforts well, provided they're fully consistent with the principles that have been set out. It is just that we take the view, and I think experience teaches us that this is the only realistic view of Saddam Hussein, that unless you back up whatever diplomatic initiatives you're taking with saying quite clearly, well, if diplomacy doesn't work, the option of force is there, then those diplomatic initiatives are unlikely to succeed. But it's important that we realize that it is in that area that any difference lies, not in the insistence of the world community that he must come into line with those UN resolutions.
Peter? Mr. President, your spokesman this morning described to us, in his words, a very dangerous environment following these alleged leaks. What's your own assessment of the legal atmosphere? And we understand that your attorneys are planning to take some action about this. What action do they intend to take?
I think you should talk to them. I don't want to comment on what they're going to do. They're fully capable of speaking for themselves and for me in this case.
And your comments, sir, on the effect of the leaks?
I don't have anything to add to what has already been said about that.
Phil.
I'm Phil Murphy from the Press Association. Could I ask the Prime Minister, you could have come here and simply talked about serious politics, but some people have been struck by the warmth of the personal statements of support that you've given to the President. Could I ask you, I mean, have you ever considered that that might be a politically risky strategy? And could I ask the President, have you appreciated those comments from Mr. Blair?
You know, to be quite honest, Phil, I mean, I've said it because I've believed it, and because I think it is the right thing to do. And I've worked with President Clinton now for some 9 months as British Prime Minister. I have found him throughout someone I could trust, someone I could rely upon, someone I am proud to call, not just a colleague, but a friend. And in the end, you either decide in politics, when you're asked about people, you're going to say how you actually feel, or you're going to make a whole series of calculations. And my belief is that the right thing to say is what you feel. And I happen to think, if it's, I don't know whether this is my place to say it or not, that if you look at the American economy, you look at the respect with which America is held right round the world today, if you look at the standing and authority of the President, it's a pretty impressive record for anyone.
You asked, do I appreciate it? No, he should have come here and jumped all over me. I mean, it's...
Do you want me to come back in now?
Of course I do. But, you know, I think it's also a testament about, there's been a lot of people bandy about the word character, and sometimes in loose and uncertain contexts. I think people who stand up and say things that they believe when it would be just as easy to walk away show a certain kind of character that I think is essential in a public leader. And I'm very gratified that Tony Blair has done that, not only for personal reasons, but because I think it will strengthen his authority as a world leader. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. President, all these questions about your personal life have to be painful to you and your family. At what point do you consider that it's just not worth it, and do you consider resigning from office?
Never. You know, I was elected to do a job. I think the American people know 2 or 3 things about me now that they didn't know the first time this kind of effort was made against me. I think they know that I care very much about them, that I care about ordinary people whose voices aren't often heard here. And I think they know I have worked very, very hard for them. And I think they know now more often than not the ideas I had and the things I fought for turned out to be right in terms of the consequences for the American people. I think they know all that. And I'm just going to keep showing up for work. I'm going to do what I was hired to do. I'm going to try to keep getting good results for them. The pain threshold, at least for our side, being in public life today, has been raised. But to give in to that would be to give in to everything that I fought against and got me into this race in 1991 to try to run for president in the first place. I have tried to bring an end to this sort of thing in our public life. I've tried to bring the American people together. I've tried to depersonalize politics and take the venom out of it. And the harder I've tried to do it, the harder others have pulled in the other direction. That doesn't mean I'm wrong. And I would never walk away from the people of this country and the trust they placed in me.
Robert. Robert President from the Financial Times. Prime Minister, this morning you said that the UK faced 2 painful years. Could you expound on what you meant by that?
Yes, I mean, as I was saying to people this morning, I mean, there are some very tough decisions that we have had to take in order to deal both with the structural budget deficit, with the inflation that was back in the system that we inherited when we came to power, and with an education and a welfare system that frankly is just nowhere near where it needs to be for the 21st century. And making those changes is going to be tough. Welfare reform isn't going to be easy. It'll be unpopular in certain quarters. Taking the measures to cure the budget deficit has been hard when people want more money spent on more public services, and we're saying, look, we can't go on with ever higher level debt levels and borrowing. We've got to act. So we've taken the action on interest rates and giving the Bank of England independence. We've cut the structural deficit. A balanced budget is something we'll be able to talk about on the other side of the water as well in a few years' time. We're putting through a massive program of reform on education and welfare, but it will be tough, and it will take us some time to get it through. But as I said this morning, I am an unashamed long-termist. I believe in making sure that the decisions that we take aren't based on the next day's headlines, but are based on where we really want the country to be some years down the line. And particularly when we're facing such enormous global economic challenges, we can't afford either to lose a grip on monetary or fiscal prudence or to leave our education and welfare system in the state they're in. So yes, it'll be tough, but it'll be worth it in the end.
Let me just make one comment to support something the Prime Minister just said when he said he was an unashamed long-termist. And in a funny way, when societies change as fast and as much as our societies are changing today, when the pace of events and their variety make it more difficult to predict what will happen next week or next month, it is even more important to be oriented toward the long term, because you have to figure that if you lay in a structure of opportunity and for a free people, they'll get it right and they'll overcome all these unpredictable developments in the meanwhile. And I think that's why I think the approach that he's taken is so wise and so right, not only for Great Britain, but for any other country as well. Yes, Mara, go ahead.
I'm wondering if you could elaborate on something that the First Lady said recently about a right-wing conspiracy who's working against you. Could you explain how that conspiracy works, and specifically, are Linda Tripp, Ken Starr, and Monica Lewinsky part of that conspiracy?
Now, you know, I've known her a long time, the First Lady, and she's very smart. And she's hardly ever wrong about anything. But I don't believe I should amplify on her observation in this case.
Yeah, Adam.
One of your common shared themes you keep on telling your voters is this matter of their rights go with responsibilities. Now, you as elected leaders have extraordinary rights and privileges, yet you seem to be saying that there's no extension of responsibilities as far as personal integrity is concerned. Is that what you're really saying? If you're delivering on the job, the big picture, it doesn't matter what you get up to in your private life?
No, nobody's saying that you don't have obligations of personal integrity. Of course that's right. But what we are trying to say to you is the responsibilities with which we were asked by our people to discharge, those responsibilities are in the issues where we can affect them as leaders of the country. You know, if you go to Britain today and you talk to the British people, and I do ask, it just could be that sometimes you guys in the media are not in exactly the same place as a lot of public opinion in terms of the priorities people have, but if you go out there and you talk to British people and you say, what do you want this new Labour government to do? They will talk to you about ensuring we don't have boom and bust, but that we have steadily rising living standards. They'll talk about job security. They'll talk about the state of their schools. They'll talk about the National Health Service. They'll talk about the welfare system and the crime in their streets. They'll talk about security in old age. They will talk about these things, and they will care about these things, and they will expect us to deliver those responsibilities. And of course it's a great privilege for us to occupy the positions that we do. But in the end, the judgment that the people make of us is a judgment based on what we said that we would do and whether we fulfilled the promises that we made. And that's certainly what we intend to do. And I do think also that people understand and want political leadership that addresses these fundamental questions in a way that means something to them. And when I was at the Montgomery Blair High School yesterday with the president, and the president got up and addressed the young men and women and the teachers and staff and parents that were there, and started going through the education program that he was unveiling, and it formed part of the State of Union address and everything. And some of those things in terms of class sizes and new technology in schools were very familiar to the British contingent here as things that we're trying to do in Britain. I mean, the enthusiasm and the delight with which those things were greeted, because those people knew that in the end, that's what they elected their president to do, that's what they elected me to do, and that those are the things that they want from us, and we've got to make sure all the time that we're focusing on that big picture. And, you know, whatever other issues come along and distract us, in the end, the judgment of history upon us would be pretty poor if those weren't the things that when we go to bed at night we're thinking about. Those weren't the things that we're worried about and concerned about throughout the entirety of our society. Because those are the things which really make a difference to their lives.
Sir? Go ahead. Mr. President. Go ahead. Mr. President, Monica Lewinsky's life has been changed forever. Her family's life has been changed forever. I wonder how you feel about that, and what, if anything, you'd like to say to Monica Lewinsky at this minute.
That's good. That's good, but at this minute, I'm going to stick with my position. I'm not commenting.
Yes. Well, relations between Britain and the United States appear to be splendid right now. There's a darkening cloud over relations with Italy. The Prime Minister, the President, the Defense Minister has issued some very harsh statements about the accident the other day when a low-flying Marine plane severed the cable and the car fell. There's a lot of anger. Some people in Italy are even asking for the closing of the Aviano base. What do you have to say to them?
Well, first of all, what happened was horrible. And when I heard about it, I was very shaken. And I as you know, there was a period of a few hours there where it wasn't clear how many people had died, where there was another whole gondola suspended, where many more people could have died, and thank God they were rescued. And the whole thing has been an agony for the people of Italy, and there were a substantial number of Germans killed. And I'm sure for the pilot of the plane and the people in our military base in Aviano, where I have been on more than one occasion, I can tell you what I think should be done. I called Prime Minister Prodi, and I told him that I was heartsick about it, that I would make absolutely sure there was a no-holds-barred full investigation of what happened, that the Italians would be kept fully informed and be a part of it, and that we would work with them in every way possible to make sure that they knew that we tried to get to the bottom of it and to handle it in the appropriate way. You know, in our military every year, I say this to the American people all the time, but let me just say this. It is an inherently dangerous business. Now, we don't know what the facts are here. Maybe somebody made a careless mistake. We don't know. I do not know what the facts are, and I will not render judgment until I do. But we lose about 200 people every year in military service in America on training exercise or otherwise on duty. And those planes fly very fast, and I don't know what the description of the mission was. I want to wait until I see exactly what the facts are. But it is inherently more dangerous than I think we think from time to time. Now, I told the Prime Minister of Italy, and I'll tell you, I will do everything I can to find out exactly what happened and to take appropriate action and to satisfy the people of Italy that we have done the right thing. I understand why they're hurt and heartbroken and angry, and they are entitled to answers, and we'll try to give them to them. Now, go ahead, back, and the gentleman in the back. I promise one more. Last question. Go ahead.
Mr. President, do you believe that airstrikes alone are going to remove the threat of biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons from Saddam Hussein? Is that a fair thing to expect from military action should push come to shove in the Gulf?
Well, there have been many thoughtful public pieces, a lot of very thoughtful articles which have been written about the limits as well as the possibilities of any kind of military action. I think the precise question should be, that I should have to ask and answer, is could any military action, if all else fails, substantially reduce or delay Saddam Hussein's capacity to develop weapons of mass destruction and to deliver them on his neighbors? The answer to that, I am convinced, is yes. I'm convinced there is a yes answer there. But you have to understand that those are the criteria for me. I've told you before, I don't believe we need to refight the Gulf War. It's history. It happened. That's the way it is. I don't believe we need to get into a direct war with Iraq over the leadership of the country. Do I think the country would be better served if it had a different leader? Of course I do. That's not the issue. The issue is that very sharp question. If the inspection regime is dead, and therefore we cannot continue to make progress on getting the stuff out of there in the first place, and then keep in mind there's two things about this regime. There's the progress in getting the stuff out of there in the first place. And then there is the monitoring system, which enables people on a regular basis to go back to high probability sites to make sure nothing is happening to rebuild it. So if that is dead, is there an option which would permit us to reduce and or delay his capacity to bring those weapons up and to deliver them? That is, I think the answer to that is yes, there is an option that would permit that. You want to ask one more question?
Prime Minister, as a man who understands the pressures of public life and also a friend and a religious man, I wonder what words of advice and support and comfort and sympathy you might have been able to offer personally to the President during these difficult times when he's under investigation.
That's what in the British media is called a helpful question. If I can, I don't presume to give advice at all. All I think that is important, which is what we've managed to do, is discuss the issues that we've set out and listed for you. And as I say, I think we'd be pretty much failing in our duty if we weren't to do that. And I've actually noticed since I've been here and I've talked to many people here, that there is, of course, huge concern at the moment of what is happening in Iraq. There's huge interest in Britain and the new government and what we're trying to do in Northern Ireland. And, you know, I think the best thing is for us to concentrate upon those issues for the very reasons I've given, that that's what we were elected to do. And that's what I intend to do. That's what President Clinton is doing, and I think he's quite right.
One more. Thank you.
So, a handshake between the two leaders, President Clinton and Prime Minister Blair, after an extraordinary, roughly 43-minute news conference by my count, which was at times emotional, forceful, and in some cases evasive, at least if not intentionally, then because the President says the rules of the investigation regarding Monica Lewinsky